Welcome, everyone, to the Feeling Lighter podcast by WeShape, where we shed old beliefs that no longer serve us, one episode at a time. The bottom line is how we feel about ourselves changes everything. So, Lisa, I am really excited today for you to get to meet Dr. Jimenez. I've met her before. She's come actually in person and done an episode with us. And the second she left, I said, we gotta see if she can come back. So
I love it.
I'm really excited. I know we've talked a lot about this episode and prepared some questions, but I'd love to see if we can read her bio and then get straight to it, because I know there's going to be a lot of questions today. So
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Honored to read this bio. Very excited to meet her. All right. Dr. Jimenez was born in Nayarit, Mexico, and raised in Watsonville, California. She spent her childhood summers and teenage years working in the fields, picking raspberries alongside her grandmother. Dr. Jimenez attended Pajaro Valley Unified School District and is a proud high graduate of Watsonville High School. Dr. Jimenez is the first in her family to earn a doctorate degree from both her maternal and paternal side of the family. She received her BA and MA in sociology from San Jose State University and PhD in sociology from the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Hortencia Jiménez is a sociology professor at Hartnell College and founder of the Sociology Club and co-founder of the Student Parent Club. Her past teaching trajectory included the National Hispanic University, Pacific Oaks College, Galvian College, and CSU Monterey Bay. Prior to becoming a professor, Dr. Jimenez worked in the nonprofit immigrant rights sector in the Bay Area, as well as during her graduate work in Austin, Texas. This work earned Dr. Jimenez the Human Relations Award in San Jose, California, Resolution of Commendations by the County of Santa Clara, Board of Supervisors, Certificate of Special Congressional Recognition, and Certificate of Recognition by the State of California Senate. Wow.
woo, welcome, Dr. Jimenez.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me to share this space again with your audience. It's really an honor.
We are so happy to have you here. I'm going to jump right in.
Yeah.
And there was something you said on our last episode that has had me thinking ever since. And I'm going to read my notes to make sure I'm really articulating myself appropriately. But I'd love to connect about the difference between being impacted by diet culture versus oppressed by diet culture. I think that this is an important differentiation, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, thank you again for being very intentional and having these conversations that are missing in the wellness and in the dieting space. They're so important. So thank you once again. It's so important. And I want to begin by talking about like the impact. Everyone is impacted by diet culture because we see it and we breathe it, like it or not. It's like these invisible particles in the air, right? It's through the values and ideologies that we may see and consume in society. So we're all impacted in that sense. We're all influenced by it. Some folks are influenced by it more than others. And specifically here, we're talking about, of course, body image, society standards about body and body dissatisfaction, having negative self-perception, negative self-image, things of that nature, right? So that is like across the board. This does not discriminate race, gender, sexuality, social class, so forth. Now, where I think as a sociologist, where I see this, what's the difference now when we talk about oppression by diet culture? We're looking at this beyond the individual level, more systematically, meaning that it's embedded in our social institutions and our society. For example, the education system, healthcare, government, the family, religion, and the list goes on, right? Yeah. So at the systemic level, and that, what does that mean? Well, we're now talking about discrimination. So when we talk about oppression, is that there is unequal treatment. And that unequal treatment can be discrimination based on race, based on class, based on gender, based on simply because of how you look, your body size. So let me give you a more concrete example of how does that oppression look like in the workplace. Well, workplace might enforce dress codes that disproportionately may impact certain folks versus others. Maybe that's not the intention, but the unconscious biases, right? So those are examples of being impacted and then systematically being discriminated and being marginalized.
That's good.
Oh, wow. So one of the things too that we talked about last time, and I want to make sure I heard this correctly. So please steer me in a different direction if you're like, that's not what I meant. Was also this idea specifically around diet culture that, like, for instance, me as a white woman, I can be impacted by that, but I can't be oppressed by that because I could do things that could allow me to achieve the quote unquote status quo that I'm being influenced by. Whereas someone from a different background might not be able to achieve that no matter how hard they try. Am I getting this right? Is this what this is the example that you were sharing last time?
You're in the right track. And again, I want to emphasize why this is so important, especially you as a white woman engaging in this conversation. That's one of the questions you had is like, why aren't we talking about this? Because it's uncomfortable, right? We don't want to address it in the first place that exists. But so just putting it out there for everyone, especially for white folks, that these conversations are necessary and you need to lead these conversations within your communities. So as a white woman, you hold both privilege, right, because of race, but you also are marginalized because you're female, right?
Yes.
So you're holding both. You like those two truths hold. You're still part of the dominant society because you're white, but nonetheless, you may still experience the sexism. And if you're from the LGBTQ community, you may experience a form of marginalization. Now, if you're not able-bodied, then you can experience also other forms of marginalization, but you're still white, right? So white as the social marker in our society. So it kind of like shields you, protects you. That's how white privilege operates. It doesn't negate that you are experiencing discrimination and other forms in your life because of your social identities. But I think that's the problem that a lot of white folks don't see, a lot of white women, right? They don't see their privilege. And that's how privilege operates. They think like, well, I grew up poor. I had to work for all this. Yes, I get it. We understand. You weren't privileged because of your social class. But nonetheless, being poor working class is different than being Black and brown and indigenous.
For sure. It's like more than one thing can be true. You can hold a level of privilege and still have some level of marginalization as well. But I think the point you're making is you need to be aware of it so that we can have these conversations as opposed to shying away from it and saying like, oh, no, I'm just like you. Because it's not the same. So I appreciate that.
It's we talked about this on another episode today of this idea around being curious about the experience of other rather than being defensive around the narrative that you might think is an attack. Right. Those are very different ways that we receive information. And I think that it's okay. I don't know. I mean, we said this even when we were having lunch. Like I said, like, it's okay that I still don't even know all of the ways the privilege impacts me as a white person. And I am learning about all of those things, and that's okay too. And I think what happens, and I talk about the emotion of shame a lot on our podcast.
Yes, white guilt.
It's a very powerful emotion. And one of the experts we had earlier today was talking about how shame's job is to run, is to hide, is to shut down, it's to go away from it.
Exactly.
And what we were talking in the context of self-validation and learning how to come kind of home to yourself and letting that voice be louder than voice of other. But what her professional recommendation in the midst of shame was to do the opposite action so that shame doesn't live. So it's okay and natural for there to be discomfort around very difficult conversations, especially when someone may feel like, oh, you're attacking me.
Right.
That's not what's happening. We are stating facts. And we are talking about systemic issues that impact the majority of people. Right? And it's important for us, if we ever want to create change at the root level, for people in positions of power and privilege to take a breath, to come down, to be open to other people's experience, and to tell shame, I see you, shame, you're here. I see you want to protect me, and I'm going to still move forward with this conversation.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, because part of shame is silence, and silence can be power, but it depends, who's holding that power. So by processing that shame and then kind of embracing it and talking about it, that's part of the liberation, and that's part of dismantling diet culture.
It
Yeah.
is.
I mean, I have this belief, and maybe I'm on the wrong path, so I'd love anyone's feedback here, but I believe that sometimes these conversations are difficult from the perspective of the person, like in the white body and the privilege that I've grown up with, because people don't want to give their power away, and they believe that if we have to acknowledge inequalities, then the only way for there to be equality is for me to give my power away. Do you think that that is a root reason why people are even unconsciously trying to hold on to the narrative?
I think there's an element to that that's true. It's this idea of not wanting to lose your power or your position or your place. But also, I think it has a lot to do, because I don't think everyone is knowingly like looking for the position of power. I also think, though, that there is a level of not wanting to feel like your efforts and your hard work have been negated. When I've engaged with people about this conversation of white privilege, the pushback that I get from people is this idea, like Dr. Jimenez said, I grew up poor, I had it hard. It was just like you. This idea that like I worked for what I have, I worked for this place, or this career or whatever it is that I have, and it feels like an attack on their efforts and their struggle and their journey when you have them acknowledge that there still is a level of privilege that exists in all your hard work, in growing up poor, in being raised by a single parent, all of that. There's still a level of privilege that exists. And I think it feels like it takes away from their efforts and what they've done to get to where they are. I don't know if you agree, Dr. Jimenez, but
Yes, completely. Yes, completely. And I would also add that we talked about this in the last time that I went, is the home environment plays a big role, right? How you're socialized, what kind of conversations do you have at home, And for us BIPOC folks, we talk about race, we talk about discrimination, perhaps all the time. And it's unfortunately, the racial socialization that we have to do to our boys. My son is 6'2", he's brown, and I had a conversation about the police, and I started crying, and I had to tell my husband, keep going. I can't continue,
Yeah.
So and I think about my own students, my students don't have these conversations at home. And then they get to the school system, the K through 12 system is failing our students. Ethnic studies in the state of California is not required, but given the events that are going on in the world, like ethnic studies is being attacked again. So like, where are students getting this information? And then they get to college, and then we're talking about race, racism, and white privilege, and oh my goodness, they're not ready.
No.
They're not prepared. So the home environment plays such a big role, and then the education system plays a big role, and then of course now social media also plays a big role. So I feel like our youth oftentimes are not as equipped, but then again, of course, they do their own learning, right? And critical awareness and so forth.
Yeah, I've been stumped by this concept a lot. Not to keep going back to this one thing, but in the business world, I have been connected with a lot of people of privilege, and I often am one of the only females. Not always, but like I don't want to say that I'm the only, but I'm not the majority in a business environment. And I just have so much curiosity, like, because I've tried having some of these conversations with some of these people, because I feel like, whoa, like, look at how much power you have. If we have these types of conversations, like, real shift can happen because you have so much power.
That's right.
So many resources.
That's right.
And there's time and time again such pushback. And regardless of my delivery, and I've given this example before, with our co-founder Tyler. Like there's been a couple times where I've brought up this issue, and then some of the language you used here today in terms of I was poor, or I was this. So, that's been and I said, we're walking away from that conversation, and if you had been the one leading that, you would be a thought leader. But because I was leading that, I'm
Yes.
labeled radical feminist.
Right.
And
Emotional,
yes, yeah, emotional. And so
passionate.
yeah, so I'm like,
Sorry.
yeah, how, that's why I want to understand why, or what are some of these reasons, like we're talking about, that there's resistance to even the conversation. Because if we can't even have a conversation, right? Like, how on earth do we evoke change from the people who, how do we break the cycle, right? And so, you know, I feel like, I don't know, I don't have the answer, but I want to just talk more about that. Like, why are people so closed down, and don't we see what you know, what power can come from this position, and how we can come together and evoke real systemic change if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that just by your podcast, by having me as a guest and other folks who are talking about other forms of discrimination or oppression, you're already challenging and dismantling the system, you know, because when I think about dismantling diet culture, it is challenging these narratives, these established narratives in our society. And some folks may think like, well, that's just not enough. That's a great start.
Yeah.
That's a good start for now. You know, yes, we can continue to do more, you know, and change policies and practices, but we can't do that if we can't even engage in a conversation, right? So that's one thing. Another thing too is, you pointed this out earlier, is overwhelmingly folks feel defensive. They take it personal, like a personal attack. And if you've lived a life of privilege, you haven't had to feel uncomfortable, right? You haven't had to think about others or anything of that nature, perhaps. And then you're being questioned to think about your reality from a different lens, from a BIPOC lens. And that's challenging, and that you honor the fear, the uncertainty, the uneasiness, all those feelings, but you don't know how to handle that because you haven't been exposed. You haven't had to sit with that uncomfortableness, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have an option. We don't have an option. So we have to muster our courage, or suck it up. Excuse the language. I don't know what else to say or how to say it.
No,
but
we have an explicit mark on our podcast, so swearing's allowed.
Absolutely. I want
Are they? And then the second
go
second
ahead.
thing I wanted to say. So one is that defensiveness, taking it personal because of their experiences, and then also part of that privilege too, whatever forms of privilege they may carry, is a lack of awareness about the societal impacts on other folks. And third is whatever ingrained ideologies or norms that they may have makes it makes it uncomfortable because you're being challenged, something that you've believed all your life.
Yeah, so it's,
And here
it's
comes someone
poking.
of color. Yes, and then if it's someone of color, if it's a woman of color, then it's even harder. So imagine if you felt in that predominantly male space as like you weren't being heard or validated or acknowledged. You can only imagine how we feel. Like that
Absolutely.
double, triple, depending on other marginalized identities.
Absolutely. And it makes me think too about the power of women holding a new standard, specifically white women holding a new standard in relationship to their partners. And I do think that more women are waking up and saying, because it's a little bit, sometimes I don't know if this is the right way to think about it, but like sometimes I feel like I'm like the bridge, right? Like I have a white heterosexual male partner who has a lot of privilege, and I can be the bridge because he is relying on me in a lot of ways. And, you know, I mean it in the best way possible as a partnership, right? Like he values the connection that I have. And if I come in and say, I'm thinking a lot about these things and I have to have these conversations in order for us to remain at the level of connectedness that we both want, I consider, so I'm trying to like also reframe it in my own mind rather than feeling defeated by the bigger picture of like, how will we ever get through to all these people? I can say, how can I get through in this partnership here today?
In this
And then
one
how
scenario.
can that person use his power of
Absolutely.
white male privilege to
Exactly.
come in and evoke change?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're looking at, like you said, because if I'm sure, you know, I get discouraged all the time. There's days where I feel deflated. We have our days, and oftentimes there are more days than good days. But
Sometimes.
But we have to think about at the micro level, like you said, like with your partner, with your friends, in your neighborhood, in your community, and then at the macro, larger systemic level, like the influence. So, like change begins with us. So
It
you're
absolutely
doing
does.
the work. You're
Yeah.
Yeah.
doing the work.
I want to get back to this discussion about oppression and really think about it from the lens of, like we were talking about as women, with diet culture being so predominant. I really want to know like how we can think about diet culture as a whole as more of a distraction from like
Yes.
breaking down these systems of oppression. Like if we're thinking about our weight, we're so focused on the scale, you know, we're not using our collective brain power to do things that would really, you know, cause some real change in our society and make things better. Like, how do you view like diet culture's role in like keeping us distracted?
Absolutely. You just said it. That's exactly. This is exactly the function of diet culture to move us away from focusing on the real issues that are impacting our families, our communities, and
Yeah.
broadly speaking, our society. So, part of this distraction is spend your time and your resources, and resources is time, it's money,
Yeah.
and other things, in trying to conform to certain beauty standards, trying to do, I mean, I'm all about body autonomy, but like spending all this time on your body, you're doing other things, all this emotional, physical, even spiritual energy
Yeah.
on something that is perhaps not attainable, right? When you can focus on like that's distracting you from like even what's happening at home with your own family. Sometimes you don't
Right.
even know what kind of issues they may be even in your family, what they're facing, your siblings, your parents, or in your community, right? In your workplace. It really just distracts you from what I think are like the important issues in our society that we all play a role. And then the other point is diet culture does a fine job in gaslighting us that we don't have power, that we don't have a voice,
Oh yeah.
right? So we have a voice and we have power. Some have more power. If you're a citizen, you can vote. So voting, right? So that's one way, right? Voting, going and voting with your dollars, right? So the real changes. So it says actually, why don't you shrink your body? You not only are you shrinking your body, you're shrinking, you're silencing yourself, your voice. You're not taking up space,
Yeah.
right? And when you realize, wait, this system, that's what this system wants. But hell no, like I'm much more than this. Actually, I know what I can do, and because I'm talking from personal experience. Like who I am right now, I'm 44, and I feel like I'm just barely living.
Right.
Like in the last decade, and especially in the last 5 years, I feel like I've been able to have a more profound impact because of the work. I'm not saying I didn't before, I have had, but it's like getting that courage and feeling comfortable being uncomfortable, but realizing that's understanding how systems of oppression operate in diet culture. Is like diet culture wants to silence me all the time on social media with folks or other things. And I have to remind myself, Hortencia, you're smarter than this. Like you need to speak up, even though you're scared and know you're trembling, because that's what diet culture wants. Diet culture wants to silence you, but
Yeah.
you're powerful. When you realize you're so powerful, it's fucking scary. You're like, oh shit, I
Yes.
can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
You realize your potential because all your life you've been gaslighted that you were never enough,
Oh, that's like
that
a
you
snap
couldn't.
moment. You could some snaps there.
I
That was
Yeah.
mean, I
good.
think about a different time in my life when Tyler and I were running a body transformation company and where I was just consumed by was I healthy? Was I eating the right things? It's silly to look back at now, but that took. Okay, I think about this analogy of like, okay, you wake up and you have 100 units of energy. That took 99 units of my energy.
Okay.
And like,
That's right.
and as I
Yes.
unsubscribed, and I'm like, holy shit, I have so much more capacity
Capacity, yeah.
energetically
Yes.
to give
Yes.
that to something else,
Yeah.
to give it to
That's
something
right.
else.
Yes. And this is exactly when it's like you're emptying your bucket, right? You're
Right.
emptying your bucket so you have more to give. You have more power to address these systemic issues. So if you're so fixated about like restricting and not eating, then you're like, you cannot address food insecurity. You can't even address like the disparities in your community. You can't address a racial profiling or discrimination that's happening in your neighborhood or in your community because you're fixated in looking at the number on the scale and shrinking when this is happening in your community. That's how these systems operate, and that's what they want.
Not to mention, you're not even fueling your brain with enough energy to think through these complex scenarios.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you're hangry all day.
Yeah. Not fixing any real problems eating a celery stick all day. That's for sure. Oh, well,
Good.
I mean, I just want to like acknowledge, everyone who's listening to this. I know sometimes these are just hard conversations, but I'll tell you this, like, they're so powerful. And it's funny, even before this call, this is our 6th podcast today, and we're getting pretty tired. I'm very sensitive to lights, and we've been under lights all day. I kind of have a headache coming on. And I was like, how am I going to do this last episode with Dr. Jimenez? She's like one of my favorite guests. What am I doing? I shouldn't have booked it at the last one. And I get on, and guess what? I just feel like I am completely reinvigorated.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, it's not just about even like mathematically. I only have 100 units of energy. Where am I putting it? It's that when you're contributing to, in my opinion, to this type of work,
you get it back.
Or to dismantling any system of oppression, really, in my opinion, it's energizing. It actually gives me surplus of those 100 units, right?
Yes.
And so, like, even in this very moment, I'm experiencing what that feels like, that I came in here drained, I came in here tired, and I actually feel really energized and invigorated by this conversation because change is possible. Yeah. And diet culture doesn't tell us that. And diet culture keeps us small, literally and figuratively. So I love that you are mentioning that important piece.
And it keeps us in silos, and it keeps us at a individual mindset or framework of me, right?
Me.
That's part of this is part of individualism in our society, and that is diet culture at its finest. So when we think about what we're doing in this space right now is collective healing, is having these conversations. That's already dismantling the system, right? And when we do things in community, in relation, in community, it is a lot powerful, right? And that's where we get the energy. That's where we get our reaffirmation of our conviction so that we can continue to do this work. But we need to continue to surround ourselves with like-minded folks so that we can have the gas or the energy, right? To keep going.
Yeah, I've kind of made a commitment to myself recently that it's okay if people aren't ready and aren't available. Like, I can't spend my life's work and life's force of energy trying to convince people that we need to dismantle systems of oppression and that diet culture plays an extremely foundational role. All I can do is connect with people who are open, who are curious, who want to make impact, and just be at peace instead of at war with those who don't want to go there. And I think that that's okay. Everyone gets it's not really my job to tell people what their path is. I feel like I'd like to use the Feeling Lighter podcast and the We Shape company to create a platform for these discussions, and people who are available for them. That's wonderful. We're here and we want to collaborate and come together as a community. And people who aren't okay with it, I want to just offer them no judgment and just, this is where you are in your life, and I'll hold space for you, and it's okay. It's okay.
Yes. And I think we had that conversation right in the first time I went, is that some folks might not be ready for that interview if they were going to feel triggered or if they weren't just ready, and that's okay. Like, whenever you're ready to engage. But it's also important to recognize that some of us don't have the luxury to just wait, right? Or not engage. So I agree with you, but at the same time, I get so taxed emotionally, like I just get taxed so much, so exhausted all the time. And I have to remind myself, like, I'm not here to convince people. I'm here to share this awareness, this message, why it's important. And even within the Latinx community, right, even on social media, I see the resistance and it's discouraging and deflating. but I can't stop because it's real. Like it has
It
real
is
tangible
real.
consequences in my community. These are social issues that I care deeply about. It's more than it's beyond me, right? So if they're not ready, I get it, but I'm doing it for the larger society,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I hear what you're saying, and I think my point in that was just that there actually, I think, are more people than we know that are available.
Yeah.
And so not to just like walk on eggshells with those who are not, but to have an
Yeah.
offering and to just say, okay.
Yeah.
And
I'm
then,
here when you're ready.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the door is open. It's
Yeah.
not, we don't have to judge, harshly judge people because we've all lived in this. Like you had a body transformation company. I was a fitness instructor and I had weight loss programs and nutrition programs with no nutrition education. That's not what my doctorate is in. So I lived in the lane of diet culture and feeding it to people
Yeah.
and saying this is the way you should do it and this is right and this is wrong. So understanding having some compassion for myself and my journey and being able to look at other people when they're not ready or they're not there and have compassion, but also like you said,
Yeah.
keep doing the work, keep having the
Yes.
conversations and let them know you can keep checking in, like the door is still open whenever you're ready, but it doesn't have to be a
That's right.
forceful thing because that's not where our energy is
Exactly.
best spent. Trying to force this
No,
on
it's not.
anybody.
No, we're not here to convince anyone about any of these systems.
Absolutely. I don't know, Lisa. Did you have a specific direction? I know we have so many thoughts.
I know
So
there's so much. How are we on time? Are we doing good? I didn't want us
I think
to go.
I think we have a few more minutes
We're
before
good.
we can. Yeah, I think we could do at least one more question
Yes,
for sure.
I did want to know. I wanted to talk a little bit about the systems of oppression in general, and then which ones you feel like have like the greatest impact on our collective body image, and then how that like disproportionately affects people of color.
Yes, that was one that I really had to think through, and I would have to have an intersectional lens. I can't just pick one thing, right? That would be a disservice to our Black and Chicanx scholars. So intersectionality. So I would say, you know, race for sure, race, body size, and one group that we haven't really talked about a lot is the LGBTQ trans non-binary community. That's huge. So I would say the intersections of race, class, and sexuality, and immigration too. There's a lot of nativism in our society. There's anti-immigrant bills that are impacting the LGBTQ community, immigrant community, right? So these are all like intersecting social issues. So the answer is there's not a single one, right? But if we think about like who's more impacted, we have to think about how Black bodies historically have been scrutinized, and the violence on Black bodies, on Black women, on trans women, on the LGBTQ community, right? I mean, for sure. And we think about also immigrants, like Latinx immigrants, and we shouldn't pick and choose, right? Or also have the narratives that I see also on social media or undying space as like we should just focus on this issue instead of this issue. It's like no, all these issues are intersecting. It's like the liberation of one group is tied to the liberation of all groups. What's happening globally is what happens in the global south is impacting us here.
Right.
You right? Dismantling systems and the liberation of others is our own liberation.
Oh, that's so important. That just brings it full circle.
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you.
I want to, I think I don't want to like you have so much valuable information, and one of the questions that I had may be overly simplistic, so forgive me if you are like, wait a minute, Katie, that feels a little too simple, but you're trying to take really complex issues and make them overly simplified. But is this idea around when people start unraveling these systems, it's like it starts with, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to diet. Maybe I don't want to be that body type. And then we go down the path of, oh my gosh, what about all these systems and oppression and how it's linked to diet? Like the unraveling gets right. The thread starts to go.
Yes.
For people who are at the start of that journey, who are just now going, wait, diet culture and systems of oppression, which admittedly, I, in my most recent endeavor, have been starting to uncover, so it's not about to shame anyone who's just now uncovering
Right.
this. It's about, I'm
Yeah.
curious because sometimes the information can be overwhelming for people. Wait a minute, I didn't even know this existed. What would be the takeaway from today's conversation? If you could say this one thing, like, would it be keeping yourself open, keeping yourself curious to others' experiences, what would it be if you could say, okay, I know we just went over a lot. This is the thing I'd love for someone to take away if you're just embarking on this perspective.
Be open and have a curious mind. And that's actually in sociology. I tell my students when they enrolled in all my sociology courses, there's a concept called the sociological imagination, and it's our ability to think about our personal troubles connected to the larger society, having a curious mind, a beginner's mind. And that's what I tell my students. And that's not to dismiss your knowledge or your lived experience. It's like, wait, I'm open to listening to these different perspectives that are going to challenge me. And I tell them, I'll hold space for you. Just have a beginner's mind, like take this with a lot of curiosity and not be defensive or take it personal, because it's not about you. It's we belong to these social group memberships. It's not your fault. Some memberships, it's by choice, and some is ascribed by birth, right? And so it's just have a beginner's mind, not dismissing your intellect or anything, just being curious and giving yourself grace and compassion, especially if you hold privilege, the guilt or the harm that you've caused unintentionally. But the fact that you are aware, what are you going to do now?
What are you
Right?
gonna
You
do?
don't want to create more harm, right? So we have responsibility.
That's good. I like the beginner's mind. It's a
And
reminder that no matter how much knowledge we get, there's so much more to learn and so many other perspectives to consider. So I'm going to take that with me. Thank you.
yeah, and we should model that, right? Even
Yeah.
though we hold these titles, I'm like,
Right.
I'm always here to learn. Always, I'm always learning. But we have to be vulnerable and say, I don't know it all, and
Right.
I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I caused harm.
So important. I'm always really humbled by, by people who have worked so hard to create educational achievements, like both of you, and to hear that level of humility is, I think that's just incredible. To say, yeah, like I'm an expert here, and I still approach life through this lens of the beginner mind, that I still have so much to unpack. And so just you leading by that example, both of you, I think, 'cause both of you are so achieved in your educational background. So I just appreciate that perspective, and I hope that, leading with that can encourage others to do the same. We always have to ask the question at the end of our episode, the Feeling Lighter podcast big question around what is an old belief that you have shed that has impacted your life in a big way? So this concept of like, I feel so much lighter now that this belief doesn't exist for me anymore.
Yeah, I'm gonna be because, and I don't say this lightly. I'm gonna give you a gift to both of you and also the audience, because I trust this space. I trust you. I see your intentionality, and you're able to hold this gift that I'm going to share, because that's the first thing that I thought about, and I had to really ground myself and really connect with my ancestors and say, is this the right time? And is this the message I want to share? And it is. And one of these limiting beliefs that I had all my life was that my family was not going to accept me, and that my family was not going to accept me, specifically my mother, once I told her that I was queer. And so on August 22nd of this year, on my birthday, when I turned 44, because I've been struggling, I've been coming out for years, and I had suicidal ideation for like years, and every year it just was getting worse and worse, and every time I was coming out to family, and one of these beliefs was like, my mom's never gonna accept me. She will never accept me. And I got the courage and I came out to my mother over the phone in Mexico. And I was crying because I wasn't raised with my mom. So you can, and my own trauma of being separated from my mom as an immigrant, as a child, so I have my own, traumas. And then like here I'm coming out to her and at 44, my inner child feels like she doesn't love me. She will not accept me. And to my surprise, she says, I love you and I accept you. And it's been a couple months and I'm still processing that. I'm still like, did she just say that? Did she just say that? And I go in December, so I'll find out. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But, just sharing this with you is that I carry that belief all my life.
Wow.
It kept me oppressed. It kept me caged, right? So when we talk about oppression, how do you know that, as a queer woman of color? And so that has been the limiting belief. And now, and this is for anyone who hasn't come out or doesn't want to come out or is scared. Those beliefs paralyze us from living our truth, from saying and speaking our truth. And I think coming out to my mother, I think was harder than birthing my PhD.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. That was extremely vulnerable. We received that gift. Thank you. And I hope the listeners can I know that they will really relate and understand that I don't think anyone shared a belief, one, that is so recent, right? Because it's easier to talk about the stuff we've overcome years ago. But something that's so potent and like right now and today. And we're both mothers, so definitely feeling all the feels around that. But that is beautiful, and I'm so happy that you got to experience that, from your mother. And I'm just proud of you and happy that you were able to be yourself and share your truth. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what to say other than I feel so grateful.
We need tissues here.
I know that we have created a sense of community where safety can be a foundational pillar so that we can open up and share the most inner human parts of ourselves. And this is how change happens, is we connect with people where safety can be shared and where the trueness of who we are can really be shown and be accepted. So I commend your continued bravery and courage. And I just really can't thank you enough for your ability to show the parts of yourself that feel so buried and so oppressed. So we feel really grateful to receive that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Virtual hug. I wish you was there. Awesome. I know.
Well,
we all need a deep breath after that.
Dr. Jimenez, this will hopefully not be the last time you're on the podcast. I want you basically every episode. I feel so much gratitude for the work that you do. I feel so grateful to even just be in geographical proximity to you. She's only like an hour from us. And I'd love for you to share where our listeners can find your work.
Yes, please follow, support my work on social media. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Hortencia Jiménez, which you'll link in the show notes. My own podcast, which is Dismantling Diet Culture, Fuck Being Calladita. You can listen to my episodes there too. And I'm not too much on TikTok, but I have an account there too. Same
Wonderful.
name.
Awesome.
Well, this isn't goodbye. We will see you again, hopefully on another episode. And thank you again to all of our listeners for holding an openness and a space of curiosity for others' experiences. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you so much.